Hello, folks. Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on future of work and workplace organized by Times Ascent. My name is Pancham Dogra, and very soon you will actually see me also to make sure that all of us. So, like I said, my name is Pancham Dogra, and I will be the moderator of this webinar today. So, the whole question about the future of work and workplace is about why are we talking about it? Of course, if you go back and look at the last 6 odd months, everyone is talking about the future of work. Future of work has been in conversation for the last 3-4 years, actually, from HR's point of view. But in the last 6 months, it has got accelerated quite a bit. Right? The question is, what has accelerated it? And we all know that we have all started working from home now. We have seen a pandemic that people call unprecedented. Yet, when you actually go back and study, we realize that this was not the first time we were faced with a situation like this. We don't have to go a century behind where the Spanish flu actually brought down around 50 million people. But if you look back and look at the last 2 decades, we had SARS in 2001, 2002. And in the next 6 to 7 years, we had swine flu, we had bird flu, then we had MERS, which is Middle East virus, and then we had Ebola, which actually was as latest as 2016-17. And then in 2020, we had something called COVID. Actually, 2019, we had something called COVID, which started. So what it tells us very simply is that it's not that we were not warned about it. And a lot of people are talking about COVID as a black swan event. For those of us who know what black swan is, it is an event that is unprecedented and it has something that has never happened. The question is it a black swan event? The answer is no, because something like this has already happened. Yet organizations had not seen how we could prepare ourselves very quickly and how we could reorganize ourselves, how we can rework our business models to make sure that we start living in the new normal, as we say. Now, the question is, what is the new normal? Like as Heraclitus said, nobody steps into the same river twice. The fact is that every day is a new normal. And events like COVID and Ebola and MERS, these are only those events which trigger acceleration. Now, therefore, the question that we have to ask, and in fact, interestingly, on January 26th, Taleb had published a paper where he talked about the fact that coronavirus is going to spread across the globe in a non-linear way because of the fact that people are traveling across the globe. Nobody paid attention to what he said. And 2 months later, by the time the world woke up to what he had talked about, it was too late. And we are all actually looking at an unprecedented event in that sense. Yeah. The question, therefore, is, as human, so are we able to predict some of the events? The answer is yes. The problem is, are we able to accept it in time? Number one. And number two, are we able to do something about it in time? The answer is not sure. And today's session actually is about that. That future of work is happening every day. But can we anticipate some big trends, number one, and can we prepare for it in advance so that over a period of time, we don't, we're not surprised or we're not taken aback by a surprising event that completely erodes everything that we have worked for? And that is the question that we want to ask and answer today. So what we are talking about today is the challenge that we are in front of us will not only be about predicting the event, but it is also about how do we predict the event yet become anti-fragile? How do we adapt to rapidly changing conditions at the speed at which the conditions are changing? How organizations will have to actually learn to look at new roles which are emerging out of these rapidly changing conditions, and how new activities will become prominent, and how do we match the existing workforce to the new demands of roles? And more importantly, How do we make sure that the existing workforce can be reskilled and upskilled continuously to make sure that we continue to deliver results in the post-pandemic era? And that is exactly what we will talk about. How we are going to structure this session today is that we will make it very interactive. And at this point, what I would request you to do is take a pause, open another tab on your browsers, or if you have a smartphone, you can log into www.menti.com. We will give you further instructions as the session progresses, but the idea is that we will continue to make this session highly interactive. What we will do is we will make sure that we share with you not only what is happening around the globe in terms of big events, but we will share with you what some of us are actually doing in this in our respective organizations to look at how future is going to look like and how we will make sure that we are prepared for it. The third thing, which is very critical, like I said, it is interactive. So interactivity is not only about polls, but interactivity is also about the fact that you need to ask questions so that we know what you are thinking about. Because the questions you ask will actually trigger the kind of conversations that we would want to have. So please feel free to ask as many questions. What we will do is we will spend the last 15 minutes of the session in trying to answer the questions that have not already been answered during the session. With that thought, what I want to do is I want to quickly introduce to you our speakers. The first panelist that I want to introduce to you is Dr. Ankita Singh, Senior Vice President and Global Head of HR in Signex Datamatics. Dr. Ankita has more than 19 years of progressive experience in managing and leading various aspects of HR, spanning across quite diverse situations and high performance and highly dynamic domains of ITES. Now, Dr. Ankita has excelled in establishing innovative and competitive initiatives. She has been able to institutionalize a strong performance-driven culture at Signex, so much so that in the last 4 years continuously, Signex has been identified as a great place to work. In fact, one of the other interesting things about Dr. Ankita is that she is also amongst one of India's top 100 great people managers. So Ankita, if you can quickly switch on your webcam and say hi to everybody, it will be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Pancham, for the lovely introduction. I have already done that. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to our amazing session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita. So let me move to our second panelist, Ms. Neeru Mehta. Neeru is the Vice President of People Development and Learning in Global Logic. She has more than 20 years of diverse corporate experience and actually interesting experience because she has done not only leadership roles and global COE leadership roles, but she has also seen transformations and M&A leadership. She is a certified life and leadership coach, and she has a keen interest in leadership and transition coaching. Well, welcome, Neeru. If you can quickly say hi to everybody, it will be great.
Yeah, thank you, Pancham, and again, thank you for really sharing the context of the whole session so beautifully, and talking about the events that are happening. I'm really looking forward to for all of us to discuss some of these aspects with the audiences today.
Thank you, Neeru. And our next panelist is Mr. Augustus Azaria. He is Associate Director, Human Resources in IBM. Well, Augustus has more than 25 years of experience in HR. He is passionate about people development. In fact, interestingly, he has spent more than 2 decades in IBM. So you can call him almost a lifer at IBM. And Augustus has a very august vision of future of work. In fact, he sees a future where political boundaries will no longer be there. There will be very blurred boundaries, and talent will actually become universal in its true sense. And we sincerely hope that it happens sooner than later. And Augustus is highly interested in the topic of the future of work, and we hope to learn a lot from his expertise and insights in the area. So Augustus, I'm inviting you to say hi to everybody. Augustus, can you hear us? I think you're on mute because we can't hear you. Augustus, we can't hear you. Ankita, Niru, are you able to hear Augustus? Even Ankita can't hear you, Augustus. Only Niru can hear you.
Let me message him on chat.
Sure, sure. So we'll just take a pause for a moment. Okay, so Augustus says that he can hear us. So Augustus, let's hope that we are able to hear you as we go along.
Okay.
So yeah, now
can
we
you
can
hear
hear
me
you.
now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Great. Sorry, maybe there was some glitch out there. So thank you, Pancham, for having me here this afternoon, and truly delighted to be here, and also to share stage with Neeru and Dr. Ankita. And a fantastic topic, very relevant and very insightful, and I'm sure it's going to be a very interactive Friday afternoon. Thank you again.
Sure. Thank you, Augustus. So audiences, now we are coming back to you quickly. What we want to do is ask you again to go to www.menti.com and type the meeting number that is given there, 3022632. Once you do that, I will quickly walk you through to Mentimeter and then we'll get started. Okay, so the poll, I can see that 6 people have already logged into Mentimeter. So the question that I'm asking everybody is, how has work from home due to COVID impacted your productivity? And I can see that 8 people have already logged in and they've already answered. So we'll wait for a couple of other people. Let's see what people are saying. Okay, the trend is interesting actually. Okay, I see some people now, the decreased piece has started to see some traction, and that's interesting actually. Majority still say that it's increased, okay? Folks, let's take the next 1 minute to close the poll before we start discussing the findings. So we have 21 people who have voted, but we have more than 40 attendees. So this doesn't look like a very exciting participation rate. For it to become successful, my request would be for all of us to actually participate in some of these surveys and activities, because the whole idea is to draw insights from your experiences also. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So I'm hoping that we are able to touch 25. Okay, 25 we have done. Good, not bad. So I think it's time that we just stop this, because people are taking time, it appears. Yeah. So panelists, I would request you to stay with this for a minute. These results. So around 65, overwhelming majority says that their productivity has increased. That's one. The second is actually so there is almost 1/3 of the people who are actually saying that the productivity has gone down. Now we will follow this with another poll question, and then we'll start the conversation around this. So participants, there is a next question, follow-up question for all of you. So panelists, this is actually an interesting observation. This is completely skewed to one side. So what I would request you to do is, as the results come in, just think about the first one and the second question. And what I would want you to do is think about how these two are related to each other. So we'll wait to hit the 25 mark, and then we will start this. Okay, so while we wait for more, so I think we should start the conversation. So panelists, I'll ask you one by one, looking at these two results. What is it that comes to your mind? One, that people are saying that the productivity has increased, number one. And number two, they're saying that the greatest challenge in working from home has been that personal time and work time boundaries are blurred. So there is no perceived break. So Ankita, your views on these two questions?
Yeah, thank you. I think yes, that's one thing which we all are going through. Earlier we used to talk about work-life balance, and now we see that we have made that swift shift towards work-life integration. Because obviously I would not say it's getting blurred. Actually, there's no line. There's no line that differentiates. So you are on a call, and suddenly you will get called by somebody, from back, and you will have to react. There is no possible way of ignoring any of these two things. So work and life at home is probably working together, and that's how it is going to be. I think people who said that they are able to work really well, probably because it's more about intention, self-discipline, and finding that balance or perfect integration between these two. And that's the reason probably they would have defined a well structure for themselves, that this is the time when I'll be working, and this is the time when I'll be sitting with my folks at home. But at the same time, acceptance and embracing the reality that not everything will be as per the set schedule. So like when we talk about COVID, when we talk about VUCA world, we talk about impact of technology, one thing we have always learned and one thing we have always followed is being adaptable in all our approaches. So we keep changing. And as you rightly said initially, we are just getting ready for the new normal. And I think now the definition of new also has completely changed. It is just the next normal. Every next day is a next normal. There's nothing new which is staying new for more than a day or probably a couple of days. So yes, I think quite relatable. The first one is very valid. Most of the people find it more relevant being at home, and they think that they are more productive. And at the same time, the only disturbance, and I would not say disturbance, only thing that they are trying to manage or they have successfully managed is the integration part. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you, Ankita. So, Augustus, now I'll defer what Ankita said. Coming out of that is a thread to you. The thread is that, see, when we talk about increased productivity, and then people are saying that, personal time and work time boundaries are blurred, one can simply assume that people are working longer hours, therefore. And people are maybe able to integrate work and personal time. Having said that, there are concerns around burnout that start emerging the moment we see these two questions. So, what's your take on whether this is sustainable or not? Number one, and number two, how do we make sure that this productivity level increase that people talk about, it never drops?
Okay, good question. Thank you, Pancham. Coming to the first part of it, okay, taking a few thread from Dr. Ankita is this. See, what has happened now is an always-on mentality, right? There is earlier, I could shut down my laptop, get into my car, drive home, use my me time, and there is a break basically, right? But here, it doesn't happen that way. The always on syndrome continues at home, all right? And needless to say, you are seeing that people are more productive. What has also happened is that we are seeing that learning has also gone up by 20-30%, okay? So which means that what powered that productivity was that people were suddenly cut off from all that collaborative systems that they had in the office, and they were in this home alone situation where they had to reach an upskill for them. So suddenly, skilling happened so quickly that the people started becoming more productive. The other one is this sustainable? Okay, now, very good point in terms of work-life balance giving way to work-life integration, because we have a new house guest now, all right? And that house guest is the office. And how well is that office going to integrate with the home, okay, is a point to ponder. But I don't see this as very sustainable, okay? That is because it is just not one person in the house doing this. It is the children also who are probably connecting to their schools and things like that. There are parents and grandparents who have their own things to do. So getting everybody within that little home, or whatever you may call it, little or huge, is definitely a challenge. Okay, and that throws us other questions, right, in terms of behaviors, in terms of relationships. So if you asked me, the burnout is definitely going to happen. We are already seeing signs of it, where people are coming and saying, hey, can I come and work from the office? People are saying that there is a portion, there is a section of people who want to come and work in the office. And then last but not least, it was your thing on productivity, right? In terms of productivity, I have to once again say here that people have found it a little bit challenging to initially get into it, because see, we have to look at this as multi-sectoral approach, right? The services industry very quickly went into this work from home mode, but there were other sectors who found it very difficult to cope. All right, so they are still struggling. There is a lot of scope out here to tell people in terms of what is the mantra about working from home. It's not just about going and connecting to your Wi-Fi and internet. There are a lot of other things to do. So I'll pause here and then take some more questions later on. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Augustus. So Neeru, coming from what Ankita said and Augustus said, I'm going to throw at you a contra question. The contra question is based on actually very interesting article that came in Fortune on the 14th of September, and that talked about JP Morgan. So JP Morgan went back and they did a study, and they figured out that instead of what we talk about here in terms of productivity increase, they have found out that productivity actually went down after people started working from home. And interestingly, they also figured out that Mondays and Fridays were the worst days in terms of productivity. Right? Today is a Friday, so I'm cognizant of that. But they actually found out that Mondays and Fridays actually were the worst. And now, starting 21st of September, they are probably the first company to make work from office mandatory, because these people really want now people to start working from their point of view. Then add to it, the CEO of Netflix very recently, he talked about, he was in news actually for the same reasons. He talked about the fact that there is no ideation, there is no creativity, there is no collaboration, there is no work happening when people are working from home. And in fact, some years back, it was nothing about COVID. Some years back, Google had advocated very clearly that, we don't have a work from home policy. There is a reason for it, because we want people to collaborate. These results are actually in complete contradiction to that. And of course, so therefore, my question to you is, there are two distinct spectrum. What's your view on exactly what is happening here? Which view is correct, and what do we believe?
So it's a very interesting question, and especially if you were, the point in time in which we are looking at answering this question is also very interesting, right? So we probably, I think in March we went into this pandemic. It's been 5 months only, and the biggest priority for when we went into that phase, or organizations, was transitioning, making sure that the work gets managed and we transition. So 100% focus was on getting the work done in a remote mode, in a virtual manner. And I think that happened. That's why you see the results on the first one, that everybody's productive. We did a very similar employee survey and asked the same question, and you won't believe it, the results matched 100%, 90%. I think it was 91% there also. But the reason, there's a reason why I said point in time, because I think we are too early to really get to say that this is going to continue like this. These levels of productivity, or these levels of so I think it's a Pancham, there's a very interesting McKinsey study also, which is really talking about, in the long run, how are organizations thinking of designing their back to office strategy, right? Is it a complete work from home versus a hybrid versus a 100% office like JP Morgan is doing? Because each of them will be right for certain contexts, and each of those would have their own pros and cons. Like, a very interesting con that I never imagined was the biases that come into play between people who would work in office, collaborate together, ideate together, versus those who 100% work from home, right? Those social biases that can come into play, and that's what I think the Netflix and the Google piece refers to. So in my view, a hybrid is where eventually companies will land up with giving flexibility, to manage a future scenario, but at the same time knowing that think of an IT company which has a completely new product to design for their customer. 100 people team hired. They really cannot, like, completely in a virtual way collaborate in the first 3 months. You have to get them to office, get to know each other. So there will be phases of norming where you will have people in office. I think that's where it'll be in my view, a hybrid based on the nature of the industry. will be what I think eventually work out for many. And each of these models will have their own pros and cons. But it's an interesting point in time that we are talking today.
Well, thanks a lot, Neeru. Actually, you talked about something very interesting, and that actually gave me a segue to share with you a screen. Now, this is a very interesting research that actually was done by a company called Workalytics. So this is a company that actually does analysis of work and peak productivity. So what they talked about was very interesting. So they said if there is an 8-hour day, this is what they have seen as what happens to people. So they have figured that out of the 8 hours, people are only at full productivity for 2 hours 15 minutes on an average. There are so many distractions like email, chat, meetings, and so on and so forth, which actually do not allow people to work in a focused manner. And then if you see, almost 1.5 hours is efficient use of time. So if you add this to the fact that people are finding the productivity has gone up and that actually hours also have gone up, so then it appears to me that unless we make some radical changes to the way we work, we will not be able to sustain this, which is the point that all three of you have actually echoed. And that is one thing that we, I think, as HR professionals and as business managers, we have to start thinking about more as we go along. Right. So on that note, what I thought we would actually also talk about is the fact that all of us know that work will become more distributed as we go along. It will become more automated. This will require frequent reskilling and upskilling. The point that Augustus talked about, he talked about the fact that 20 to 30% learning, for example, has gone up. And we will have to focus on what we call intentional learning. That means we will have to continuously upgrade ourselves, almost maybe add one skill every quarter to our repertoire if we want to continue to stay productive and relevant. That's one. The second thing that all of you talked about is, unless I learn how to prioritize and how to look at what works for me in terms of increasing our productivity, we will not be able to do much. So on that note, we transition from work to workplace. So I'm just going to request people to come back to Mentimeter, and then I will quickly share with you.
This is quite interesting, huh?
So attendees, on Mentimeter. So attendees, I request you to go to www.menti.com, use the code 3022632 and answer the question. So we'll wait for 25 to happen, and then we'll have a conversation around this. So when I look at the word cloud, it's interesting. Time management comes out as an interesting big item. So panelists, just for your benefit, the bigger words are the ones that are being more used by people. So we had given people at least 3 options that they can put, 3 skills that they believe will become critical. So it is very clear that agility, adaptability, time management, they actually come up as the largest in terms of number of people who believe will become important as we go along. So Augustus, so I'm throwing this question at you, looking at agility, adaptability, time management, how you think would agility, adaptability, and time management will help people succeed in future in your mind? Or you have a different view, maybe other skills or something?
Yeah, well, I think my views are more or less aligned with the word cloud. And if you see, we were all trained with all these skills and competencies because we were trained for the perfect storm, right? And we are now in the perfect storm. But except that, to drive home a point, we are in this storm, but in different boats. So what is happening here is that our learnings are a little bit within our own small boats. Okay. So therefore, to drive home effective learning, what we have done, we are seeing this, right? We're driving heavy levels of collaboration and integration. Okay. Now, apart from the marquee programs and learning programs that people do, we are going into the businesses and seeing what are those specific skills and training programs that they require. And what we are doing is we are curating what is called very consultative course content, which is completely on our Your Learning platform. Your Learning platform is like a Netflix. It's something that pushes things to you. It knows you with cognitive ability what skills and competencies you have and what is it on the horizon as far as the organization's business plan goes, and prepares people to take on those skills so that they are future skilled. And finally, it also builds what is called COVID resilience, all right? In terms of what are those other things that you need to do, the mindfulness, the empathy, the soft skills that are required. Okay, all these things are also part of it. So I will stop there and leave it to the other panelists to take it forward. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Augustus. You actually talked about a very interesting thing. You talked about empathy, and that is one thing that I would actually, loop back at Neeru. So Neeru, now when we talk about the future of workplace being automated, more digitized workplaces, more technologically connected workplaces, where is a question of empathy that actually comes up, and how? And why this becomes an important term, because we keep reading about it everywhere whenever we talk about future skills and so on and so forth.
So I think it's a this whole softer aspect, empathy being at the heart of how you are making people experience the organization virtually, right? It was easy to do that, relatively easier when you were physically present. Even if you were not talking, people would understand that there is empathy. People are there. Now, I think this is again at the point in time we are as organizations, as leaders. There's a big realization to be human. When everything, almost the environment is forcing us to literally, go on an exponential speed on our digital journey. There is a joke which is running around these days that it's not the CEO or the CTO which is behind the digital transformation, but it's COVID. right? And
Correct.
in that, how do you really, if there's a emotional part of the culture, right, that one has to make sure that their new joiners experience, that their employees experience all those experiences, when you were giving a feedback, when you were exiting a person, all of that. How do you be more empathetic, and how do you do that virtually? It's the lens that one has to wear on every process or everything. And again, most important leadership skill right now is really to be empathetic, because rest of the things will happen. Resilience and empathy has to be at the heart of how we are getting into this future, because eventually we'll get there. Uh, it's about the how, and how do you take your people along and make them experience your culture sitting at home.
Interesting, and that's a very interesting take. So what I also wanted to do was to actually take another view on empathy from employee experience design point of view. So Ankita, looking at post-COVID and looking at the future, how things are going to be, if you can help us understand what steps your organization has taken to use empathy to redesign the employee experience so that people don't feel that anything has changed as far as the experience of working in Signex, for example, has been.
Sure. So I think a lot of things have already changed, and the first move is obviously to understand and tell them that things are not same, and whatever is the changed mode, we will still use it in the best possible manner to ensure that the experience and the culture remains intact. So today, when we talk about our employees, we talk about four primary things for which we connect. So, which is connect or collaborate and communicate and contribute. These are the four C's I think Signex or any organization is working on. And we have got into that mode where we are counseling and training our leadership team before doing anything else, because as we covered in our first question, the intent is really important, and leaders have to be ready to adapt, explore, and stay relevant. That's the only way where they'll be able to understand the market outside, and at the same time they'll be able to help internal employees. So we have come up with a lot of processes where the core is that you don't have to wait till the things get broken. You don't have to fix it when it's broken. You have to start fixing it even if it's not broken. So all those remodels that we talk about these days, as we discussed, every single day is changing. So you have to be ready to relearn, reevaluate, restructure. I'm sure whatever policies and processes we came up with in the month of March, we thought this will remain as is throughout COVID era. But by May, we were again back to our boards and we were revisiting anything and everything that we defined. Again, if we talk about today, probably whatever was defined in the month of March or May, even that is changing. So that's the approach we have taken to keep revisiting and adapting as per the market need and as per the employee's need. And empathy, as Neeru mentioned, that becomes the core, because when you are understanding people, when you are listening to them, when you are respecting their time and their integration, their balance, which they are trying to manage at work, and still they are trying to contribute to your business model, that has to be brought together as a model. And that's the reason probably we initiated a couple of activities, which is lead. Generally, the moment culture changes, we expect the junior most people to adapt. The first line from management would be, yes, things have changed, we have enabled you, please accept and start doing it. So our lead is where leaders change, E is enablers and executives, and then the departments. Similarly is care, where communicate, adapt, response, and empathize. So like Augustus mentioned and Neeru mentioned, we have moved technical skills everybody is taking care of. We have moved to more softer and people skills, where we have understood first internally within management and leadership team why it is important to hold back to employees, to understand them, keep them safe, and be little clear, be authentic, First, once the comfort is built internally, no matter how well or how soon situations are changing, people will adapt and they'll be always part of a successful business model.
In fact, you brought out a very interesting point, and in fact, I'm just now going to try and see weave ideas that Augustus, Neeru, and Ankita you talked about. In fact, recently on Netflix there is a new documentary that has come in. It's about how the social dilemma is the name of the documentary, and it talks about how empathy is being used to
Yeah.
to get people to hook on to their systems. For example, it talks about Facebook, Twitter, Insta, Pinterest, and so on and so forth. And these are people who are talking about the fact that each one of these people who are coders, they all went to Stanford Persuasion Labs, where they were taught how to influence people by understanding them. Similarly, when you look at design thinking, the first step is actually empathize. So yes, you're absolutely right that unless I understand who I'm designing the processes for, I will not be able to do anything. And I think one of the questions that has come up is that in future technology is set to take over many cognitive jobs, leaving organizations perplexed. What's our view about technology conquering human jobs? I think the answers that you gave very clearly say that technology will not take over human job. Human job will be to understand more about other humans and use technology to create experiences so that people are able to perform better. So which is exactly what you have actually spoken about. So another interesting question, Augustus, since you talked about the fact that 20 to 30% learning has increased in the last 5.5 months, and you also talked about your learning as a Netflix of learning. So a question from audiences is how skill building for future skill can be used to catch up with the rate of technological change. So what are you doing about it in your organization to make sure that people are skilled at the pace the technology is changing, or maybe faster than that, for that matter? Augustus, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you. I think the cognitive ability that is built into the tool, which is called your learning. Okay. And so what happens here is that people have a specific number of hours that they need to complete. And then there is a commitment from a skilling perspective, in terms of, do I want to become a full stack person, or am I going to stay at half stack, or whatever the case may be. And then with today's, perfect storm situation with people being in different boats, what is happening again is that each requirement, so IBM is a conglomerate of like different companies within, okay? So therefore, each business unit has unique set of skills that it requires. So therefore, a lot of consultative learning happens here. In terms of, it's not like a all one size fits all, but consultative learning. And then skill building here, if you look at it, we go even beyond IBM to do the skill building. Now, whether it is with the National Skill Development Council that the government of India set up, or skilling, the colleges, the faculty, and the academia out there so that we get the right skills. So we have a program called Ignite, Reignite. Reignite is basically at those academicians to bring them up to speed as to where the technology is going, so that academia and industry to some extent are bridging that gap, and it's also a bit synchronized. But typically, as far as the employee goes, he or she today has a very deep push factor. Pull factor. Earlier, there was a push factor. The managers will have to push people into learning rooms, right? But today, it's not like that. There is a pull factor because of the high level of digitization that has happened and the interactive learning. And like what I said, a cognitive digital learning platform, okay, that pushes things to them and gives them feedback on and on. So all these things have, to a very large extent, enabled us to have a very skilled workforce, which is very future ready. Thanks.
Interesting, Augustus. So, in fact, while you were actually talking about reskilling, you were talking about industry academia. I also, what I'm doing is I'm actually sharing a quick poll with the audiences, and then we will come back to Ankita and Neeru to look at what they're actually talking about. Yeah. So audiences, my request to you would be to come back to Mentimeter for a minute, and since you actually talked about skilling for future, I thought we will actually ask people how prepared their organizations are in terms of understanding what new skills are required, number one, and number two, to what extent are they actually starting reskilling and upskilling interventions already. Is the screen visible to all, the Mentimeter poll? Yeah, okay, cool. So audience, my request again would be for you to log into menti.com. Use the same meeting code 3022632. In case you have not moved out of Menti, then of course you can continue to vote. I can see that people have now started moving. So let's see what it says. Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So majority still says that they have started new skills, which is interesting. So while we keep looking at the poll, so Ankita, Neeru, my question to you, building on what Augustus said, was that do you also have education corporate partnerships or academia corporate partnerships for skilling your people in specific skills? Ankita?
Yes, so I think nobody can do without it, looking at the current situation or scenario. Yes, so we have internal tool, and that also focuses on futuristic learning or how to be future ready. And as Augustus mentioned, again, it is more proactive instead of being at the repairing stage. It's more of a preparing stage, and I can see the numbers going up to what 62% of people say yes.
Correct.
And I think organizations have realized they have that intent, and I think we all had resources, we have all had people, we had capabilities and abilities to plan and execute, we all had time. Only possible thing missing was intent. We always knew future is going to be too dramatic, too unpredictable, but we were still not there. Now organizations are much more conscious with respect to which are those technical skills those would be required in coming future, and at the same time what level of focus they want to give to virtual skills, because obviously virtual being the new real today, be it cognitive skills, social and people skills, emotional skills, and the re-skills that I spoke about. So yes, we have this system which is deep digital employee engagement platform, and that's where we have our development tool enabled, and that's primarily used for all the future ready training transformations.
Interesting, Ankita. Thanks a lot. So, Neeru, what has Global Logic done to create these academia corporate partnerships?
So I'll come to academia corporate, and so on the academia corporate side, we do, of course, we are a technology organization, and we want to get early into the game, so with the with the engineering colleges where we definitely get our young talent from, we start our engagement much ahead of the time every year. So we do have a platform where the whole their campus to corporate journey begins almost 12 to 14 weeks before they join. And we have this whole program which is very, very well defined. with milestones where they get mentored by our techies, are really,
Okay.
and we enable a lot of webinars for them. So there is this whole interaction which is going on, and by the time they join, we pretty much know them, on a from a perspective of who is a specialist in which area. Can what percentage of people can directly go onto what kind of transformational programs? So a lot of work happens before their day one at Global Logic, right?
It's
So
actually
so that is,
yeah.
yeah, so that is
Sorry.
one part of the whole journey with with the academia. The other part is it's the career paths, or it starts with the role, and the learning interventions or learning journey is very, very carved out. Let's say you're a software engineer, in the you join as a software engineer, and the path, as you get into your lead role, or you become a SME at the later. So what are the kind of learning interventions that are designed along that path? One is that, whatever role you're playing, role aligned learning. The other part is the academies. What we very, very proactively do is run academies which are very, very focused on future capabilities and skills. So at this time, for example, we have a digital academy, we have an architect academy, we have data engineering academy. And these academies are really run by our SMEs, with L&D
Ah,
becoming the curators and facilitators or co-program designers with them. And this is almost like continuously investing into the future kind of programs. And
it's
for an
actually
organization,
interesting. What you talked about is actually very interesting, because if you see some of these things very interestingly were done by companies like Google, who had, for example, Hal Varian as one of the advisors in the people analytics piece. Hal Varian actually is a noted economist, and in fact, undergraduate textbooks on economics most likely would be written by him. Microeconomics
uh-huh.
and macroeconomics books. Hal Varian is the guy who normally writes it, and he actually works with Google on solving some of the business problems. Similarly, Richard Thaler, who pioneered the idea of behavioral economy using his book called, what was the name? But it talked about nudge. The book was Misbehaving. Misbehaving was the book that he talked about, where he talks about the fact that humans are not rational, we are not robots, and
Yeah,
therefore we are irrational in our behavior. Before that, Dan Ariely. So Google actually were able to they were able to get these people to work with them on solving some real-time problems, and that has also shown in their success. And increasingly, I see that more and more masters of research program people are now coming and doing researches in corporates, which is a very heartening thing. And I hope that it continues, because I think when we need a sound conceptual framework, there is no better rigor than an academic institution that can provide.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
that actually is very interesting. Well, thanks a lot for that. So now, see, another interesting thing when we talk about workplace of future, one is of course learning on demand, which Augustus you talked about at Netflix. The other interesting change that is happening is talent on demand. So learning on
Yeah,
demand is for essential employees, but the whole definition of employee also is undergoing change. And therefore, it'll be interesting for us to actually look at again audiences. So audiences, I will request you to go back to Mentimeter, and I'm going to put the next poll. So one concept that people have been talking about is talent marketplace, which is now increasingly becoming popular in India as well. Of course, it was very popular abroad, like Upwork, for example, made it very popular in the US. In India, you have a company called Flexing It, for example.
yeah.
For creative
They
people,
were,
there is something called Fiverr. For Fiverr now, Noble House has started doing something like that. So I want to know from audiences in your organization, to what extent are you guys actually using some of these talent marketplaces? And then I will defer the question to panelists depending on the responses that we get, to look at what the future of talent would look like. Not only learning, but the talent, or the skills, or the concept of full-time employee as we talk about. So let's take the next 1 minute, because this will be the last question that I'm going to throw at the panelists before we bind up. So far the results are actually fairly skewed to not at all, to limited use. Okay, the trend is clear. So while of course we wait for more and more people to talk about this, uh, so so uh, so panelists, the question to you, of course, is talent marketplace platforms like Plexingate, Upwork, and Fiverr. Now, going forward, when we talk about gig talent, and there is actually a question on this also. So, in fact, I'm going to use that question to frame my question. So, people are actually talking about what are your views on gig work or remote work models. The fact is that I think we all know that remote work is a reality, no longer a dream. Number one. Number two, there are companies like Automatic and Miro, which are 100% distributed, not a single office. And they're billion-dollar plus enterprises. That's the beauty, and it's consistently successful. On one hand, you have organizations like that. On the other hand, you have platforms like this, which is again picking up in India also to some extent. But the fact is, if you look at the survey results, it tells you that it is not yet as popular as the potential it produces. And therefore, my question, so to Dr. Ankita, let me start with you. The question is, how are you using the talent marketplace or the gig model in your talent mix uh, to prepare for future? To what extent are you looking at this as a plausible model uh, for 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 future talent requirements?
Sure. I think if we talk about today, probably yes, the percentage is very low. But when we talk about future, and definitely by 2030, if we see the percentage of gig workers or boundaryless organizations or boundaryless employees is definitely going to increase exponentially. So as I think Neeru initially mentioned, and Augustus as well, it's going to be a hybrid model. So we cannot generalize it. Every company will decide, create that right mix, probably more on the basis of project-based requirement. But that's the future. It is going to expand exponentially. If a company is saying that no, this is not the model we will get into, probably I would just say never, because I think we all were so sure that we will never start working from home. And it was a new thing. Nobody was exploring. And today, people are actually thinking what percentage of employees should go back to work. So things have drastically changed and they'll keep changing. With respect to my organization, I think we have already moved to a model where we have these small duration projects for 3 months or 6 months, and where client expectation is such, no organization would want to take that bench cost, or probably would want to make that employee sit in the organization and unnecessarily spend on cross training, even if you are a little clearer about the future. So yes, I think that's one place where we are using it extensively, and I'm sure if at all I look at the percentage increase in my organization in last 1 year, I have already seen it from 10 to 40%, and it is further growing. We are still exploring more as far as our PS, which is professional services. We have actually created a group, separate group for that, looking at the model and how beneficial it is. And also you have more options. You can change your talent. Instead of investing more in the current ones, you can actually get ready people from the market, place them on projects, and once the project is done, you're done with the model. So yes, I think that's the future.
So that's actually a very interesting insight. So Neeru, what about your organization? Are you using a gig as a model extensively, or are you still nascent? And any plans to do it in future?
Future is obviously, we are actually looking at, and then this is, in fact, just before we went into the lockdown, we were having some discussions on workforce modeling and evaluating some of the work that we can potentially give to people on these platforms, pretty much what you mentioned. So those were the discussions that are going on, and I'm very sure that it'll actually be a competitive advantage a very definite competitive advantage in future as well. So yeah, right now I think the percentage is less, but it is there. Futuristically, this is going to go up.
Interesting. Augustus, your take on how IBM is going to uh, leverage the gig model or the talent marketplace model, and how you have been doing it in the past?
Let me take a leaf out of my book, yet to be published, where we talk about the workforces or workplaces resembling a movie production unit. Now, what happens in a movie production unit, right? You have a script, and then you have a producer, director, and then you go and get a talent, whether it's the dancers, heroes, heroines, musicians, cameramen, and all of them. And these are all professionals in their own right. They are someplace, somewhere. A common objective brings them all together. And then they understand that vision and then go come together, collaborate, finish the movie. And then what happens is that they box it and then it goes up. So if the movie clicks, box office, they get paid for what they did, plus they get a royalty. So compensation model will also change. Okay. Well, if it doesn't click, if it bombs, all right, it's an issue of reputation. So therefore, it's so important to be so connected and networked and have those endorsements. All right. So that is where the future of people, workplaces, and the ways of working, what we call is the new ways of working, is definitely in. As far as IBM goes, I'm sorry, I won't be able to comment on it. It's still very nascent. But overall, this is the trend. This is also a projection or a prediction, so to say, of what the future will be. Thank you.
In fact, thanks a lot, Ankita, Augustus, and Niru. This is actually interesting insight that you gave. That it's starting slow, but we believe it's going to accelerate. Number one, this will create a really, actually we'll have to have a separate team, HR team, to manage this entire contingent workforce, including their learning, their assimilation, and in fact, maybe for the first time, the team stages of forming, norming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning will actually start coming into play, because unless you have project teams consistently adjourning, you will not have newer ones getting created. And I think that's going to certainly happen as we go along. We will have holacracies instead of hierarchy.
Pancham, sorry, I can't hold this back to interrupt you. So the thing here, while you said the HR teams, it's about the HR teams adapting. It's all about a mindset change. I see the business will take this very quickly, because the business is now seeing a very clear cost-efficient model here. Your labor costs are down. Okay, so which means now that the shift has to happen with HR. And if you go and tell the business, man, look, you're going to save so many $1 million, you got it. Okay.
Correct. And in any case, since people are saying that productivity has gone up, in any case, people will be lapping onto this. You are now more productive, so we need less people. And whoever we need, we can get on demand to meet the seasonal requirements. So yes, some of these things, you are right, will have far-reaching impact on how things pan out. So let me just take the next 1 minute quickly to summarize what we covered here. And then we will just quickly close the session. So what we talked about today is how work will evolve, is that this will become more distributed, this will become more automated, this will require frequent reskilling, upskilling, this will require all of us to consistently create a repertoire of skills. For that, for us to become not only specialists but full stack employees, as Augustus talked about. How work will change, we all know that workplaces will become more distributed because work is becoming distributed. In fact, workplaces will become close to the consumer, which you would have already seen now. Actually, more and more supply chains are becoming smaller, and the whole world is facing the issue that China has created. For example, the entire world's manufacturing was concentrated there. Now people are thinking about alternative places where they can manufacture, including India. We talk about Atmanirbhar, Make in India. You all know that this is actually going to happen because your supply, your transportation lines will be disrupted, and you have no other choice. The workplace will become automated. it will become more flexible, it will become compulsory to learn and relearn and unlearn, it will become more collaborative using technology, and it will become a continuum. So there is no concept of full-time employee versus not a full-time employee going forward. Going forward, it will be about talent on demand. An essential employee, when you need someone to do the core job and maybe act as an aggregator, and talent on demand from outside the organization. It could be academia, it could be specialists, it could be contractors, to make sure that my work is delivered. And what is important, which we talked about, is how we will have to also start looking at ourselves as individuals, is that we have to start learning to become operational in fully digital environments with minimum physical proximity with our colleagues. We have to ensure that our cognitive skills are developed to ensure constant innovation, design at the speed of customer or faster in some cases. For example, COVID is an example. So that means it doesn't matter which profession I am in, I have to learn project management, I have to learn problem solving, I have to be ideation, I have to know ideation, I have to know design thinking. And more importantly, we are going to talk about the fact that more and more people will need social and emotional skills to ensure we remain sane, we are able to collaborate with others, and we are able to help our teams navigate better. In fact, interestingly, CEO of Infosys talked about it. He says that, in our hiring mix in Infosys, we are going to hire more people with humanities background. And there is no bigger testament to this than this, that going forward you will need people with high resilience, social and emotional resilience, if you really have to continuously succeed. And last but not the least, we have been talking about this, people who cannot constantly upgrade themselves will find themselves outside the job market. With that thought, I conclude this webinar. What I want to do is thank the three speakers, Dr. Ankita, Augustus, and Neeru, for their time, for their insights. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope that others also were able to get a lot from their insights into their organizations and what they have seen around them. And I'm hoping that when we go out from there, at least we will have taken one thing that we can start implementing tomorrow onwards.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Pancham.
thank you, Pancham.
Very well moderated. Thank you. Good question.
Thanks,
Thanks a
Ankita.
lot.
Thank you, Augustus.
Thank you, Neeru and Dr.
Thanks, Augustus. Thanks, Pancham. Very interactive and very engaging. We thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm just now going to stop the presentation. I am hoping that I'm able to do that quickly.